All right. Good morning, everyone. Dudes and dudettes. One take, everybody knows the rule. All right, so what do we need to know for an AP micro exam? As you've seen, that the released 2026 questions had a, in my opinion, rather unique question set comparative to history. Historically speaking, we rarely see a Unit 4, I guess you want to say, or I simplified as question 1 is almost always a graphing question. But this time they gave you a payoff matrix or game theory, which is rather unusual. So what we see is in 2026, Q1 is the game theory. And with that, that kind of changes the way we think about the exam, because historically it's almost always been a drawing the graph. So if we were to predict, the prediction would be, is I think that they're going to not continue this and they're going to go back to a graph question. So that is going to be a Unit 3 or a Unit 4 graph. So as we know with that, that is just being able to understand the two most important concepts. One of the most important concepts is going to be connecting the market to the firm. So the connecting to the market would be where you have your supply and demand, and you do the ... and then you create either graph, whether that be the perfect comp graph, or if you want to do the good old monopoly graph. Any which way, I'm still going to say let's focus on the graphs situation and then doing the side-by-sides, right? Because the side-by-side is historically just the most common Unit 1, question 1 question. For question 2 in 2026, they did a marginal cost question, which is going to be your Unit 1 or your Unit 2 kind of question. So Unit 1/2 question. These questions, I think, are going to be the most hit or miss, because obviously when you bring math into a class, like macro or micro, naturally individuals are going to make mistakes. So this, I would say, continue to prepare. So my prediction would be very similar, is going to be work on that MC. They also remember that there's different types of marginal cost questions. There is marginal cost per product, marginal cost per dollar. So we have to remember that this marginal cost per product or marginal cost per dollar, that is going to be very important as well, right? And then Q3 in 2026 was a tariff graph. The tariff graph. I think the tariff graph is a brilliant question. Obviously, as we know, they try to stay, I don't want to say that they want to stay political, but they want to have relevant information. And obviously with Trump, we know Trump loves, that's a terrible heart. Oh my God. Trump loves tariffs. So I would have predicted a tariff question on the exam. For late testing days, I'm not necessarily sure what to expect, but I could easily see them do a tax or tariff graph. So my predictions is going to be a Unit 3 or 4 graph question, marginal cost product, dollar, and then for the last one is a tax or tariff. But as we know, they already did the tariff. So I'm going to say let's lean less on the tariff. Let's focus more on the tax. Generally speaking, though, these are all predictions, so I really have no idea what is going to be on the actual exam. But based off of the historical data, I'm very happy that I have documentation of every single exam since 2011 or whatever, because the new AP classroom, they only allow you to go back to 2023. So now there's less data to go off of. But yeah, it was rather weird to have a game theory. Actually, as I'm talking to myself, I could easily see them put a game theory for Q3. So yeah, I think that would be my general predictions, is going to be a graph Unit 3/4 question, marginal product question, and a tax graph or a game theory graph. I think that would be my general prediction. So what do we need to know? What we need to know is for question 1, as per usual, we're going to have to work on the side-by-side graphs. So If we're doing a side-by-side graph, you have your demand, your supply, and then you're going to have your firm next to it, right? So let's just say we're at cost, right? So we have our ATC, we have our Mr. DARP, and then we have our MC, right? Generally speaking, these kind of questions is going to be very simplistic. They're just going to ask you to make sure that you do the labeling. So we always do quantity, price, cost, quantity. Make sure we always label everything. So I'm just X, X, X. Generally speaking, though, what they're going to have you do is they're going to shift one of the two. Typically, we see a demand shift. Historically, it's been a demand shift right. If we have a demand shift right, the demand here is also going to shift. You find the new equilibrium spot, so the equilibrium went up and to the right. So then we just do, and there. And then now you have to find if you're in a profit or a loss in this scenario, because Mr. DARP increased, we now have a new profit amount, right? So we have to find our new MR equals MC. So our previous MR equals MC is here, our new MR equals MC is here, which makes sense because what happened to our quantity here? Our quantity increased, our quantity increased. So because of those quantity increases, we need to understand that it has to happen in both. It cannot just happen in one. So if it happens over here, it must happen here. So in this scenario, we're doing it right, and then you just label in what is your profit. The way you do that is you find where it hits ATC, highlight purple, because purple is a fun color, and there's your profit right there. All right, so generally speaking, that is going to be what we need to know for question 1. For question 2, we're going to need to follow along. I think it would be logical sense for them to keep consistent with some form of math-based question for question number 2. All of the math-based questions, it's really just being able to understand what the question is asking you. So making sure that you understand are we focusing in the actual marginal product? Are we focusing on marginal product per dollar? Are we looking at the marginal cost of a product? So marginal cost product. It just depends on what they're talking about and making sure that you understand what they're talking about and answering it directly. So per usual, the way I would suggest is that when we have one of these charts here, they'll look like this. Make sure that you write out what is the actual value. So maybe $5. So if this was 10, 15, 20, 25, you know that every single one of them is going to be $5. So it's pretty easy to see that it was a constant marginal cost, because the marginal cost was constantly increasing $5 every single time, because you have plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, plus 5, as well as just making sure that you give yourself that math. Do not do it in your head. Write out. This is huge for an exam. You need to write out the answers for an exam because they can see that work. If they see that work, you might get a little lucky. Generally speaking, though, write out everything. Give yourself the most benefit. Do not do things inside your head. And then for question 3, if it is a tax graph, as we know, taxes are going to be impacting supply, demand, supply, quantity, price, supply shift left, right? Bada boop, bada beep, do. And then that's your deadweight loss here. Wait, why am I doing that? I have a highlighter option. Come on, Tim. Use that highlighter. Let's do red, because, I don't know, I feel like red is a good color for deadweight loss. All right, so that's your deadweight loss. That's typically all you need to do for those kind of questions, as well as for game theory. Generally speaking, for game theory, I'm going to say it's very similar to a question 2. Whenever there's math, write it out every single time. Every single time, write it out inside of those game theories, okay? So in the game theory kind of questions, my suggestion would be is when you get your 2 numbers, 5, 10, 15, 2, whatever, circle the ones that make sense. So if something has a dominant strategy, make sure it's really easy to see, because if there's two circles, then we could see that there's going to be a dominant strategy for a certain company, right? That they would have a dominant strategy in, I don't know, buy. And if this company has a dominant strategy of, I don't know, let's say that's like 20, and that's 1, and I don't know, something like 6 and 30, then we know that that simplifies our life, is that that is a dominant strategy for whoever. So again, circling, underlining, using scrap paper if you're allowed, making sure there's some form of note-taking system inside of your head is going to be very, very, very beneficial. Okay? So overall, I think that that is going to be very simplistic on maybe some predictions or things to study last minute, but best of luck to everyone.